A lot of people would like to know really what happened, and I think deep inside somebody probably also is feeling like they'd like to have someone gain the consequences of which they should get over this whole situation.
I think they stopped. She probably ran. He got his gun out.
Came across her jogging all alone on a road with no traffic and abducted her and killed her and dumped her in the woods.
John just told me, he said, well, I'm the last person I saw her alive.
I know this road like the back of my hand. Same with the stations, only FM band. Farms and truck stops, fireworks stands. Yeah, I know this road like the back of my hand.
By December of 1978, it had been about a year and a half since John Ackroyd had raped Marlene Gabrielson. He'd suffered no consequences other than a beating by Marlene's husband shortly after the attack. But that winter, he would become intertwined with a different crime. It would follow him for the rest of his life and haunt a quiet community for decades.
There was another case where I had seen this girl, and then all of a sudden she turns up missing. It was a Kaye Turner. And I would suspect, under an investigation of that.
In 1978, Kaye Turner was 35 years old. She lived with her husband Noel in Eugene and worked as a manager at a local public health agency.
Kaye and Noel lived across the street. I didn't get to know them right away, but pretty soon they became like good neighbors. Somewhere in the mid-'70s, she started running. A lot of us started running. I mean, we just, it was right around the time of Prefontaine. Kaye took it up somewhere in 76, 77.
She didn't just take it up, it became a way of life. Kaye ran a marathon in September of 1978 and hadn't let up a few months later when even a cold winter morning wasn't enough to keep her inside. On vacation with her husband and a group of friends at Camp Sherman, a retreat outside of Sisters, she woke up early and headed out on a run.
She was going to run in the morning, and as a matter of fact, had wanted my wife to run with her, but my wife had just taken up running and I think was a little embarrassed, or just couldn't run with Kaye the distance Kaye would want to run and as fast. It was still a little undecided, but in the morning, my wife at the last minute decided not to go with her.
Kaye's exact route isn't known, but she expected it to take about an hour. When she hadn't returned after more than twice that long, her husband and friends began to worry.
I guess I knew Kaye too well, and she was too stable and too smart to either get lost or to run away or whatever people were thinking.
They searched, but found no sign of her. Soon, they called the police.
I received a call from the Salem Patrol Office regarding a missing jogger at Camp Sherman. District Attorney in Madras requested that the state police help assist the sheriff's office and investigate the crime. Lieutenant Vedito, Bob Cooley, and myself was over at Camp Sherman interviewing people regarding this missing Kaye Turner. A couple of high school boys said, well, you ought to talk to John Ackroyd. He's seen her since we did. That's when Ackroyd's first name came up.
Tom Hanna, who worked with him at Saniam, he lived in Camp Sherman, and he got off work about the same time John did, I think. And when he drove down and went that back road to get to the store, he saw Ackroyd's pickup in close proximity to where Kaye Turner was running. Ackroyd was interviewed in January 11th, I think, and he had said, yeah, I was there.
He said he did see her jogging along the road. He wasn't really a suspect, only just of interest.
because you were in that area that morning.
Right, I guess.
Can you tell us about that, how you happened to be there and where you had been earlier?
Well, like I told you, it's this one friend of mine he wanted to go out and get some medicine, and he didn't have a gun. I had a 22.
You were going to go
get a deer because they needed the meat, didn't have no money, and he was hungry, and the kid was hungry.
And you had arranged this the night before or sometime before? Or?
It was a couple days before, I guess.
The friend whose family needed food was Roger Dale Beck. Ackroyd's account of that morning shifted over time, but he said that on the day before Christmas, he got off work from an overnight shift at Santiam Junction at around 6:45 a.m. He said he then drove west on Highway 20 to help a disabled motorist, turned around, and made his way to Camp Sherman to see if there were any deer in the area. There, he saw Kaye Turner running for the first time. He then realized he was low on fuel and decided to head to a gas station about 10 miles away. He turned around and passed Kaye for the second time. In some versions of his story, he claims he stopped and spoke to her briefly after almost hitting a dog with his truck.
Okay, so she was running, when you went in, she was running south?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And when you came, and when you seen her the second time, she's running the same direction?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the dog ran out and you had to stop?
Yeah.
And you talked to her?
I asked her if I heard it. I didn't feel the bump or anything. I told her, I said, well, Merry Christmas. She said, Merry Christmas to me, and I drove off.
Ackroyd says he then continued on to Sisters, filling up his tank before meeting up with Beck and heading out to poach a deer with his .22 caliber rifle.
John was an outdoorsman. He knew, he would talk to me about tracking things. He was a hunter. And hunters doesn't necessarily restrict it to animals.
Did you shoot something?
Yeah.
What was it, remember? Buck, doe?
No, I believe.
Doe. And you dressed it out there?
Yeah.
Fuel fed it? What, threw it in the truck?
Threw it back to pick up, went to Rogers.
Who shot it?
I did.
One shot, two shots?
One shot.
Where'd you hit it at?
Right between the eyes.
Who are the searchers here today?
Well, mostly friends of Kaye Turner's, and most of them will be from Grants Pass. She grew up down there, of course, and they're friends coming up now to help us out here.
How long do you continue a search like this until it was given up?
Well, in many cases, we probably would have given up some time ago, but in this case, I guess there's enough people who are still interested in wondering what happened that they want to continue.
Kaye had visited her parents 2 weeks before her trip to Camp Sherman. In their garage, on a pad of paper she knew her dad would later find, she wrote, "Hi, Dad. I love you. Kaye." He didn't come across that note until after she had disappeared. It was the last time her family or friends would ever hear from her. The only signs of her that remained were some running shoe tracks in the mud by the side of a Camp Sherman road.
The tracker had, this is when Nike was just brand new, and they were all waffle footprints. He had big boot tracks with a heavy guy, and these Nike footprints going up this trail that would, from the paved road up to ultimately where her remains were found in that direction.
This guy comes in and says, I found these tracks, and I'm pretty sure they're hers and involved in this.
Tracks of her footprint, or was she dragged, or what was
Well,
that
it was her footprints plus a man's boot, and from the tracks, it appeared that there had been a struggle. and that they had gone off to the side of the road and then back.
So this is where she would have had been taken.
Right out through.
Within a week, a few days after she disappeared, they go through her desk and they find that in the last 6 weeks she spent 2 extended weekends away with two other boyfriends, each of whom was married. So, the cops, they got 5 suspects, 5 potential suspects. They got a husband, they got 2 boyfriends, and they got 2 boyfriends' wives. It's hard to find a needle in a haystack, but if you got 5 people that you got names of, you go talk to them.
They searched for her, couldn't find her. The original investigators were convinced the husband did it, so they really missed a lot of things.
Noel Turner, who eventually left Camp Sherman with a car full of unopened Christmas presents for his wife, hadn't known about Kaye's affairs. By concentrating on him in those early days of the investigation, police lost valuable time and gave short shrift to other aspects of the case.
Normally, when somebody dumps a body in the woods, they don't go miles out in there. If you're searching for a body, you don't need to go much more than 100 yards off the road. So what they should have done is covered her entire route, 100 yards off the road all the way around. If they'd have really done a good job of the search, they'd have found her. But they were so convinced that the husband had done it that they really didn't do a good enough search. But hindsight's always 20/20 on the things that we miss.
With no body and no leads, the case went cold. Until 8 months later, when John Ackroyd walked into the Camp Sherman store and told the shopkeeper he'd found a body in the woods.
Nobody had any suspicions particular to him until he walks into the store and says, "I've found Kaye Turner."
He went to the store and reported that he'd found bones in a pair of yellow jogging shorts. I interviewed him in the car, and his face was perspiring, his forehead was perspiring, and it wasn't overly hot.
And the one thing Clayton always told me is that John, and when he talked to him, I told him about the god-awful stench when he found the body. Well, all it was is weathered white bones. There wouldn't have been any odor involved on it. There would have been as the body would have been decomposing.
I had a very high suspicion that John Ackroyd knew more than he was telling us.
For anybody that spends any time in the woods, scrap clothing is not real concerning. It's not uncommon at all to find clothing in the woods. And so that's kind of hard to believe that he was sure that it was her.
We went back the next day with the scout troop and searched the area. We found the watch, the lower jawbone. I found a hair made into a bird's nest.
He's sitting down eating lunch and he looks up there and he sees this bird's nest. And it's not like any bird's nest he's seen. It's made out of this long blonde hair wrapped up with the twigs and all. And it was right there where she had gone down.
Out hunting, and my dog was running around and started barking. I went over there.
Okay. And what did you
Well, some bones. And I went down immediately to the Camp Sherman store. And then I had the woman there call the police, and I took her back out there.
just went down to the store?
Right.
Told the people you had found something?
Right.
What did you tell them? Do you remember?
Probably something like found some bones out there. You know, probably human. Pretty sure it's human.
Identify who they might be at all?
No. I'm not positive, but I think the police officer asked me. who it could have been, and I just thought, might be that missing girl.
Referring to the
Kate Turner, I think.
Bodies dumped in the woods are often scattered by animals and ravaged by the elements. The bits of bones Ackroyd found were not obviously human. An avid outdoorsman like Ackroyd would probably have overlooked the scraps of clothing as nothing more than debris, but Ackroyd immediately identified them as Kaye's. These peculiarities, combined with the fact that Ackroyd was one of the last people to see Kaye alive, made him a prime suspect in her murder.
We got a hold of John and asked him to take a polygraph. He agreed to take the polygraph. Well, he failed the polygraph. So Bob Cooley and I interviewed him in my office, and he denied everything except that he did see her jogging along the road. His polygraph asked him if he'd ever touched Kaye Turner, and he said no. Well, he said he did. Polygraph showed that he did. So we asked him about that touching her. He said, well, he did touch her in February, and she was laying on top of the snow.
During an interrogation after failing the lie detector test, Ackroyd changed his story and made a startling disclosure. He said that he'd first found Kaye's body 2 months after her disappearance. His description was detailed and disturbing, noting that her eyes were gone and that animals had obviously been chewing on her body. Her throat had been slashed, and there was a hole in her chest that looked like the exit wound from a bullet. Ackroyd claimed he didn't report the discovery out of fear he would be blamed for Kaye's death. The interrogation ended when Ackroyd asked for a lawyer. Do you think he came back out here in February and just checked on?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he was curious how it was going. I would think he described exactly what he saw.
Despite being convinced of Ackroyd's involvement in Kaye's murder after the changes to his story, investigators had no hard physical evidence.
If they'd have found her right away, they would have had a lot of evidence. They would have had the bullet, and they would have had the tracks, and not only the forensic evidence, but they would have had good, fresh witness information. The sooner you can get there and the sooner you can find somebody, the more evidence you're going to have to put the whole thing together. The longer it goes, the harder it gets.
We had no evidence to hold him, so we let him go. That was about the end of the case as far as we were concerned. We kept interviewing people that come of interest. It bothered me to know that he did it. I think about it quite often. He made the statement, why did I have to find her? I was the last one to see her alive. He was no doubt in my mind that he was the last person to see her alive.
The suspicion and circumstantial evidence implicating Ackroyd weren't enough for police to arrest him. The investigation stalled, and he continued to live and work at Santiam Junction, roaming Highway 20 alone. For more than a decade, Kaye's case remained cold.
There have been times people take people out, kill them, and bury them. There's other times where they've taken them out and just throw them on the ground after they got through and just leave them.
It didn't surface again until July 10th, 1990. I walk out of court, and there's a note there that says, call Jason Carlisle, Linn County DA. I call up Jason, and he says, hey, Bill, have you ever heard of John Ackroyd? And I said, yeah, John Ackroyd killed Kaye Turner. And he said, well, his stepdaughter disappeared yesterday, and we've got an active investigation going on.
Every question in every breath, every exhale leaves a little death. in this way, and a memory that will wander with the ghost of Highway 20. Yeah, I know this road like the back of my hand. Same with the stations on the FM band, phones and truck stops and fireworks stands. I know this road like the back of my hand.